Just a bit. Alright. There we go. Okay. We are recording the interview of Erlis Earl Morse. The interview is being conducted by David Morse from Wright State University Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at his home in Fairborn, Ohio. It is 1:30 on the 2nd of August, 2016. All right, let's go ahead and begin with when and where you were born.
I was born on the 1st of August, maybe 1934, in Richwood, small town, Ohio.
Okay. And what were your parents' names?
My father's name is Joe, J-O-E, not Joseph, J-O-E S. Sloan Morse, M-O-R-S-E. And my mother was Velma Christ, a maiden name, and Velma Morse.
Okay. And what were their occupations?
My mother never had an occupation. She was a housewife, like you call it. And Dad, he did different things. I know he worked at Transit Shoes in Williams during the Second World War, and I never got to go to where he worked, but he was. They did a lot of building there in Alliance, Ohio. They did a lot of building and making parts for tanks and for war material at this place. And then he was a carpenter at one time, and then he did yards when he got older. Worked in doing landscaping stuff like that.
And you had siblings, correct?
Pardon?
Siblings, brothers, sisters?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. How many did you have?
I had 7 sisters and 3 brothers.
All right. And did they ever serve?
I had a brother, 2 brothers. My one brother. They're all 3. All 3 of my brothers were in the service. My brother Eldon was the youngest of the 3 brothers, and he was in the service in the Air Force for a while, and then got out. And the particulars on that, I'm not sure why he got out. And I had a brother. My oldest brother was Army in the Second World War. He fought in the Philippines. And I had a brother in the Navy, and he was assigned to Brisbane, Australia. And that's all I know about them.
Right.
They're older than me.
Yeah. Okay. What were you doing before you entered into the service?
I was working for the city of Alliance, Ohio. I'd taken a job doing road work, whatever was needed for the city street department. Okay. When I enlisted in the Air Force.
Okay, so you enlisted in the Air Force. What made you decide to enlist into the Air Force?
Well, actually, I was going to go into the Navy, and why? Because I don't know. I had a brother in the Navy, and he came back, and I thought he looked real cool in his uniform, and so I was going to go into the Navy, and then there's a couple weeks before I was at work there at the department there in Alliance, and this chap had got himself a dishonorable discharge from the Air Force. And that's all I heard about that later, but he said, you don't want to go into the Navy, go Air Force. And he got a bad conduct discharge for some reason, and that's all I knew of him. I didn't know his name, anything about him, but he said, you want to go in the Air Force, you don't want to go in the Navy. It's like, fair enough.
Right.
So I went in the Air Force in 1952.
Wow, 1952, man. So when you enlisted, this was 1952. What was basic training? Where was your basic training?
At Sampson Air Base in upstate New York.
Okay. Do you remember much about your basic training?
Oh, I remember quite a bit. We had the 12 weeks of basic, and I think they get about 3 or 6 now. But we did 12-week basic, and while I went in September, and upstate New York was cool and damp, and I ended up going into the hospital after I was in basic training for I'd say in the neighborhood of 3 weeks, and developed. I lost my voice, and I ended up with acute laryngitis and a touch of pneumonia, and I was in the hospital. Got shot up with penicillin for a month.
Oh wow!
And come out of there. I had to go back into basic training, but it was in a different flight. They called them flights, and my number went way down. So I ended up being in basic training up there, including the hospital, for like 4 months.
Yeah, I had to do an extended stay in basic too. I ended up getting shin splints really bad, so I did a 2-week extension there in basic, but I got through it as well. Do you remember any of your instructors in basic, or at least any temperaments that you'd like to share from your instructors?
My first one, I'll never forget the second one. When I come back out of the hospital, and he was kind of mean. He did a number on my eye one time when I glanced over to him, and he had his gloves on, and he said, I just glanced over, and he said, you keep your eyes straight ahead, and he did it with his finger on the side of my eye, and said, you keep your eyes straight ahead, soldier, or whatever.
Yeah.
He might have called me something else, but and I'll never forget his name, Deary. He even ran at attention. He would jog around, see him going around the area, and he would run it as he was at attention. So, I'll never forget Sergeant Deary.
That's good. So tell me about your training after that. Did you have any tech school or any sort of training after basic training?
No training. I went no tech school. So, but I did go to went down to Georgia. That's where we went to Georgia, and there's a story about that in regards to back in those days. It was still pretty tough in the southern states, and I think I mentioned this to you in regards to the train ride down there.
Yeah, would you like to share about that?
When I was traveling with a black gentleman, and he and I got as far down as Washington, D.C. on the train, and when we got off the train there, we were supposed to change trains, and a conductor came up to us and the black gentleman had to go to this car, the colored car, and I said, oh, whoa, I said, we're traveling on orders, and I said, we're supposed to stay together to the base in Georgia, and he after a fashion, he said, well, okay, go ahead, he can go with you. So we and then that was an experience that I'll never forget, just being in the southern states back in that would be 1952.
1952.
And they still had drinking fountains with white and colored on each of each drinking fountain.
So this was before the big civil rights movements there in Alabama.
Yeah, this is 1952.
Yeah.
It goes long back.
Wow.
And it was a shocker to be stationed down there, and I think I mentioned when I was at a snack bar, and a bus drove up. It said Harlem Globetrotters on the side of it, and I was sitting there eating a sandwich, and the 3 or 4 black gentlemen got out of the bus and walked to the front of the store here where they had, you just ordered here at the front, and he motioned. I seen the guy inside motion for him, pointed and was saying something to him, made him go around to the back to be served, and that's the Harlem Globetrotters, and I think there were coaches, or it wasn't the team. It was owned by 3 or 4 people, and wanting to buy to eat, and that was a shock to me about the South.
Yeah. So a bit of a culture shock, given that you were from Ohio.
From Ohio, yeah.
Yeah.
Where we did.
You didn't have segregation.
Nothing like that.
No. Okay.
So.
Wow. All right. So, so your first duty was that in Georgia?
Georgia. Turner Air Force Base in Albany, Georgia.
Okay.
Is where I first started out, and I was in field maintenance. I was did aircraft, any kind of painting, but mainly aircraft painting. The USAF on aircraft, and I was in the Strategic Air Command at that place at Turner Air Force Base, and that's when they first came out with the fist, with SAC fist with the lightning and steel shield, and I was part of a crew that would put that on the side of the aircraft when they first came out with it, the SAC emblem.
Wow, that's amazing. And did you do? Now you've been in. How long were you in the military altogether?
I did 20 years with the.
20 years with the Air
regular.
Force. Okay, and
52 to 72.
52 to 72. Wow, that is impressive. That is amazing. And did you? No, you didn't. You started off with doing painting or aircraft maintenance type deal, painting the emblem on the aircraft. What else did you do in that 20 years?
When I left, I got assignment to England and went to Bryce Norton Air Base, RAF Bryce Norton Air Base in England, and was there for 4 years.
Did you do the same thing there? Were you?
No, when I got there, there was no need for. for field maintenance painters. So I was put in a automotive maintenance and was doing body and fender work on automotive welding, pounding out dents and whatnot.
Yeah.
And replacing glass and just fixing doors and that they tear up. So
Yeah. Now, so you're in England. We didn't really talk about this, but let's go back real quick. How did your family feel about you joining the military?
well, I wanted to join when I was 16, but I had to wait till my mother. You had to be signed for if you was you had to be 17, and you didn't have to be signed for, and so they didn't like the way my brother in the Navy came back swearing and whatnot. So that's the way the Navy does. So anyway, sorry Navy, but yeah, I just did the job there. That was mainly what I did for the 4 years that I was there in England. That assignment. I did get married while I was there, and went over there in 54 it would be, and left at 57. In 1957, I married an English girl from Cheltenham in England. Met her and married her in the 57. Yeah. So, yep.
Wow, 57. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you personally for marrying her.
Oh.
Considering I'm your grandson and everything.
Yeah. Couldn't have picked a better one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you're in England, doing a different job in England. Met your wife there in England. Let's talk about deployments. Were you ever deployed?
Yeah, I did go to Vietnam. After we come back from England, we went to Mountain Home Air Force Base in Idaho.
Okay.
And from there, I went to Vietnam and did a year at Da Nang Air Base in Vietnam. And the worst assignment. Not because I didn't want to go, but I had the 3 children at that time. I had 3 years left to do for my 20 years in the service and to retire. And it was very bad that I had to leave them. The youngest was a year after I was in Vietnam for like 3 weeks, and the youngest was a year old, Shelley, and then the 2 boys, and so she went from having me to having just take care of them, the 3 of them, on her own. Yeah, it was terrible for her, and I often I think back on it, and I should have been tempted enough to go to Canada like they were doing back then, protesting the Vietnam War, but I felt like I had to go. I mean, others had to go and do my thing. But it was one of the worst things that ever happened to me in my 20 years, to leave her with being mother and father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, leaving them was obviously pretty traumatic. How did you stay in touch then while you're in Vietnam with your family to make sure, everything, that to let them know you're okay and for them to also communicate back to you?
The only thing we had was just write and letters and did communicate on tape a few times.
Okay.
Talking to them, talking to the boys, and her. It was mainly letters. That's all there was back then for communicating.
Yeah. Well, tell me about your experience there in Vietnam. What was your job?
Well, it was traffic management, they call it. I would have to do paperwork, and then the shipping and receiving of freight from Da Nang, shipping it back to the States, do paperwork on it, get it to the aerial port to be loaded on aircraft. But the paperwork had to be done on it and make sure it was supposed to be rodent and foot-free and all that. That rodent and free. I remember having to make sure the stencil was on there because they didn't want anything going back from Vietnam in the way of rodents and insects. Insect and rodent free, I think that's what we had to make sure was on there. But get the paperwork together. Sometimes I'd be doing paperwork, sometimes I'd be out loading with a forklift onto a flatbed and get it into the aerial port.
And did you happen to see any conflicts while you were out there?
No, I didn't. I went through, and one of the gentlemen there that I was stationed with, and I went with them. We got there about the same time, and he said he counted them. It was 28 or 29, 20 some odd rocket attacks we went through while we were there. And they would usually hit about 3 o'clock in the morning and make sure we were all in bed, I guess. And it was some hairy experiences. We had the rocket debris falling on the barracks. At least one time that I can remember for sure during all those attacks. But they were interested in hitting the aircraft, but the rockets they would send in, they just spray them, and they didn't know for sure where they're going to hit, whether the aircraft or maybe a fuel dump and fuel area where. And I heard they hit one after I left, a rocket attack. But it would keep us moving quite a few times during the year I was there.
Yeah. So let's talk about coming back home from Vietnam. How was the trip coming back home? How were you received by your family and friends?
Oh, that, well, it was just so good to be back and be in one piece because they lost so many, and it could have been one of them, but always have that in the back of your mind, but and be thankful that back and hold the ones that we love, that I missed 365, right to the day, 365, over for a year. And,
So you're in Vietnam for a year?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
1 year, right to the day.
Wow.
And I've been just so glad to be back and see all the loved ones again. I don't recall, you hear about them not getting heroes welcome back and all that, but I didn't miss. I was so glad, I guess, to be back and being with my loved ones again. Then we got to go to Germany. I had a concurrent overseas. I would like to have gone to England because my wife being British. I requested England, but then they come down and said I could go to Germany. There was an opening in Germany for my AFSC, my career field, and so I got to Germany because it's close to getting into England, get her home, and we did. While I was in Germany, we took a trip over to England, and it was I found Germany very interesting. They were very nice people. We rented from. The landlord happened to had been in the war and had scars from. I heard that he was captured by the Russians and tortured. But he was our landlord, and he was a big husky man and just a good people. They treated us so good, him and his wife, and it was an interesting and enlightening. I was 5 kilometers, where I was in Germany, I was 5 kilometers from the East German border, and the outfit I was with was USAFSS, which was a security service and had to do with surveillance of the East German side of the border, which was 5 k's from where we were living on Hof Air Base. It was a very interesting time, and got to go right up to the border and look over the no man's land and the rows of barbed wire and whatnot, and they could even see the East Germans over there, on the other side. But yeah, it was a very interesting time being in Germany after the war.
What time was this?
That was 50, like 1959.
59. Okay. All right. And this was, how long were you in Germany after you got out of Vietnam?
We were in Germany for like 3 years.
3 years.
And they were closing, they were going to close Hof, the that, so we left, and I went back to Andrews Air Force Base in D.C.
Okay. So while you were in England and Germany, how did you stay in touch with your friends and family back home in Ohio?
Well, I wasn't very good at writing letters and all that, and I think the way I felt, the way they were, was like no news is good news. So, but we didn't really. I wasn't much of a letter writer all the time. I was in, except when I was in Vietnam and send them back and forth to Margaret.
Yeah, that's understandable. All right. Well, let's. So when did you get out again? It was what year?
What year?
72?
72.
Yep, 1972. So a lot had changed between the time you got in, 1952 to 1972.
20 years, yeah.
Yeah. So what experiences did you learn while you were in the military, and how did those apply now that you had gotten out?
Well, I didn't. It seemed to. I got a job with the post office through the transition program they had. I tested for the to get to the get in the post office, and not too long after I got out, I got a call from the post office that my name had came up, and I needed to go and do some further testing, and I was carrying mail in Canton, Ohio, Football Hall of Fame town, and so I was there for 4 years in that post office, and moved out. Needed to get closer to military because up there it was like 200 miles to the nearest military installation, and during my 20 years I was entitled to commissary, shop on the base, and shop in the commissary, food. But it was so far that I couldn't take advantage of my benefits, so I thought, well, back then, at that time, they were closing a lot of bases, and so I got to get someplace where they most likely not close. I didn't want to move to an area, and then they closed the base, and they would go, I'd have to move again. So I heard about the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, and I went out there, paid my own way, and went out and checked it out, and came back and told the wife that if I'd applied for the employment on the Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs, and that's where then we ended up moving into Colorado from Ohio.
So you'd say you integrated back into society pretty well after 20 years of service?
I didn't. It didn't. Wasn't no bother.
Right.
It was a must. Everything's a must, and when you're doing something like that, and I didn't give it much thought, really. Just turn the knob and do the job.
So what are some life lessons that you learned from your time in the military?
Oh, for a start, it was just res- respect for your superiors. You you had to what was drummed into you from basic training. Of course, they eased up on you once you got your PCS out of basic training, but you just, I don't know, I felt like that you get a sense of authority, obey the officers and people that are assigned over you, and you do what they say, and very little questions. But I think that's probably one of the best things I got is respect authority.
Yeah, that's good. And it's hard to see anymore out there.
I don't think, just my opinion, I think it should bring back the draft. 18 years old should go 2 years. 2 years. If they don't like it, get up and do 2 years and learn the respect for authority. And it could be a lot less crime.
Honestly, I've yet to meet a veteran to think different, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So, how has your military service impacted the feelings, your feelings about war or military life in general?
How
is your service in the military?
Mm-hmm.
How has that impacted your feelings about war or military life in general?
To need be, it's something that you, like I say, you got to respect what the superiors. You got to trust in them and do what they say,
Mm-hmm.
and respect authority.
Yeah. Is there a message you would like to leave for future generations as they watch this, considering that this is going to the Library of Congress?
Well, like I said, I would do it again. I feel like I learned a lot, in regards to authority, and I don't think it would hurt at all. I don't know how mothers and fathers would feel about sending their sons into potential war. I mean, it could be, but 2 years of I think would be really, really beneficial to young men, and not necessarily women. I don't know about, and if they want to do it, yeah, but I don't think it should be mandatory that women go. Definitely men for 2 years. Learn respect.
And last thing, is there anything that we have not covered that you would like to talk about or address?
I can't think of anything offhand.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much for telling us your story, and thank you very much for your service and for being a great grandfather.
Oh, thank you. My grandson. Number one grandson.